TBI stands for traumatic brain injury. The majority of those injuries are caused where the brain is shifted very quickly forward, backward, to the side.
It could be a simple accident, a sports-related injury.
Being shaken like a shaken baby. It can occur from a fall.
A lot of things happen on a brain injury. They can be very trivial or minor, or could be very serious. When there is an accident, an impact, the brain hits inside, moves inside this hard shell.
So when you're falling, when you are in a car accident or falling off your skateboard, it can tear the brain. And not only can it tear it, it can bruise it, and that bruise can be permanent.
The brain responds by causing a paralysis, the same thing that you would have a chest pain when you have heart attack. When you have a brain attack, you will have problems expressing yourself, understanding, swallowing, moving an arm, moving a leg, walking, thinking, behaving, because the brain controls everything.
The most common problems, whether it's a mild, moderate, or severe brain injury, is still the same. It's cognitive and behavioral.
The severe brain injuries are the persons who require total care. Those are the ones that we lost.
The mild brain injury is, without question, the most underestimated injury, probably in all of medicine. They got their bell rung. That's a brain injury. That's a concussion.
And close your eyes. And it's typical that they don't go to see the doctor until later on, hours or the next day, when they have a headache or they have difficulty coming out with the words. And that means that some blood vessel bursts and there is a blood clot that is really pressing on the brain, and the brain is telling you do something.
This could be a potential time bomb where a second injury, even less severe than the first injury, can cause much more damage.
People have to understand that the reason why they call it silent epidemic is because you can have an injury to the brain that is not visible to anybody's eyes.
As a mom, I think all of the dreams that you have for your kid, will he get married, will he have kids, you know, they've all changed. I was bowling, and Josh came out of the bar about 9:30 that night and, you know, was talking to me. He was obviously drunk.
And she said, "You're not driving, are you?" And I said, "Mom, my car's not even here." And she's like, "Oh, okay."
About an hour later, when I got done bowling, I went in to see if he'd come home with me, and they were gone. Knew he was gonna live after like 3 weeks. They did the brain first, and he lived through that. They did the heart, he lived through that, and then it was just a waiting game, a daily battle of, you know, trying to keep him alive.
You know, I woke up from a coma, and I don't remember really much of the first year. When I came home from the hospital, you know, my mom and dad had rearranged their family room and have a hospital bed put in the family room. And, you know, I couldn't do anything on my own. I was totally out of it and in my own little world and incoherent of really anything that was going on around me.
Okay, that's good.
All of Josh's problems are from his brain injury. His bones healed, his heart healed, every problem that Josh has is because of his brain being injured.
I've been fighting for, 8 years just to get my act together, and, and I know that I have very much so surpassed any of the odds and probabilities that I was given for the first year after I got hurt. As a result of my injury, though, I just can't get my left arm and leg to work the way I want it to. And it's frustrating, frustrating, frustrating.
You're welcome. Oh, it was such a beautiful car.
Because I spend a lot of time at the high school, I've, football games. I do concessions for the football games, and you see a kid, get hurt, and they go back in and play, and I'm like, nobody takes it seriously. They just they don't think about what's happening to the brain.
I never wore, a helmet when I was riding a bike or skateboard, and I can tell you why. You know why? Because this was never gonna happen to me.
I see little kids without helmets on, and I think, parents, what are you doing? Meet my son Josh. That's what I want to say to him.
When my mom and I are in speaking to the driver's ed classes in high schools about drinking and driving, I can see the punk kids that are sitting there just like I would have been 15 years ago, thinking, man, screw you. It ain't gonna happen to me. It'll never happen to me.
It changed our whole routine then, and from then on, my son Jake was looking at colleges, and he changed his whole life plan. My son Doug, I think to this day he's still angry. Josh's sister, she lost her mom. I mean, my life was taking care of Josh. You think you're going to make these decisions, and they're only going to affect you, and they don't. They affect everybody that you know.
Before I got hurt, I could go anywhere, and I had friends everywhere I went. Now I don't really have, my best friend is my mom, and she's stepped up to the plate that night, and she's been there every step of the way for me. I'm almost 30 years old, and my mother is my best friend. How cool is that, guys? It happened, and I gotta deal with it, and I will be different forever.
Imagine a world of constant confusion. On city streets, you quickly forget where you're going. Each traffic sign beckons you in a different direction. In the grocery store, you can't remember what you came for, and you are overwhelmed by the choices. In an airport, every sign and sound catches your attention, and you become hopelessly lost. A world where every thought is fleeting. That's the world that Claudia Osborne lives in.
It's hard for me to administer my life, figure out how to organize, prioritize.
The fact that she can speak about it at all, or write a book about it, as she's recently done, is a story of one woman's struggle to come to terms with a terrifying loss. That story began 10 years ago, while Osborne was enjoying a challenging career as a physician and professor of medicine. It's a story she often tells in the many lectures she gives these days.
One night after work, I went bicycling in my neighborhood without a helmet.
Claudia can't remember what happened next. She learned the details from her friend Marcia Baker, who was riding with her at the time.
We were riding along the side of the road, and I was in front. She was behind me, and I saw a car turn at the crossroad ahead. And unfortunately, he did not turn into his own lane. He crossed the midline. I heard a crash, and I turned around, and she was lying on the ground, on the road.
Claudia had sustained a severe and traumatic brain injury. The frontal and parietal lobes of the brain affect intellect, memory, and judgment. That's the part of the brain that was damaged in Claudia's accident. Thousands of cells in her brain were torn and disconnected. The effect had changed her personality and life.
She had trouble concentrating. She could not do simple multiplication. Here's somebody who was a doctor and solved complex problems every day and couldn't do 9 times 7.
She was just different.
Jean Finlater, Claudia's mother, visited soon after the accident.
She was definitely apathetic.
Claudia was living in a kind of daze, sleeping 18, sometimes 20 hours a day, and she couldn't seem to get any better.
We kept reassuring ourselves, telling ourselves that she just needed more rest and that she would be better. And then she wasn't.
Head injuries affect people in different ways. Some are what doctors call disinhibited, unable to control their mood and emotion. Others suffer a kind of paralysis of the mind. It's called adynamia, and Claudia had it bad. During her therapy, Claudia was asked to speak publicly about her problem. Just a year before, she had been a brilliant physician. Now, she's frozen, unable to organize her thoughts.
I would just sort of sit there I wouldn't talk. I wouldn't be able to comprehend language very well. I wouldn't remember the situation. I would just sort of neurologically shut down. My mind just would sort of turn off like a light switch.
There were pieces of Claudia that were lost forever. I didn't know that. She no longer had spontaneous conversation because she no longer had spontaneous thought. She didn't daydream because there was no thought activity going on.
Claudia has not recovered. She will never be cured. But during the last 10 years, with enormous effort, she's learned a set of techniques that allow her to live with her extraordinary loss.
Get book covers from the basement. It's a little like if the bridge washes out the road in front of you, you got to take a long detour around it. With your brain, because we can't rewire it, we can't make it the way it was before, you have to find different strategies that get you the same result.
Claudia suffers tremendous short-term memory loss. To compensate, she uses a recorder to keep track of whatever she's intending to do.
Get the deli. You know, it's always a drag to get to the garage or the basement and not know what you're doing. A little short-term memory is what it is.
That's your short...
Yes, it's my short-term memory.
And then there's the devastating inertia caused by her adynamia. Without special effort, she would do absolutely nothing. So to keep her energy up, she listens to music, has a dog for company, and wears a special timer on her belt with 2 settings.
If it's my standard timer, it goes off every 15 minutes. It just means, what are you doing? Are you just sitting there? Should you start another activity? If it's a different timer that goes off, then that's an action timer. And that would be something like start dinner, let the dog back in. I'd love it if you didn't get money today.
The heart of the system Claudia has worked years to perfect is a specially coded appointment book
hi, Cindy.
with clues about how to behave normally.
Yeah, how's the baby? I would look always wherever there's a circle, and that means I have to come back to that. And it just mentions her baby and her baby's name, which is Natasha. And that way I can say on each phone call, and how is Natasha? I don't want her to have to understand, oh, Claudia doesn't remember my baby.
Everybody is forgetful. Why is your situation so much different from what we all experience?
Head injury is a series of problems that I do, glitches that I have. Only I can make those glitches without strategies hundreds of times during the day.
Those glitches can still cause great anxiety. To prepare the lecture she gives about her unique perspective on head injury, Claudia spends dozens of hours in preparation. Remember, before the accident, this was a task Claudia would have taken care of in a few minutes. Watch what happens when a phone call interrupts her study.
Hi, how are you, actually, should be the question.
After the call, she's got an uneasy sense of confusion. What had she been doing? She checks her timer and recorder.
Nothing there, nothing on the beeper. Oh, yes, of course, my papers.
Now she frantically starts to look throughout the house, touching the surfaces of things.
If I'm scanning to find something, I can't say, where did you see them last? I wouldn't know what that is. So I just scan, and what I find is, depending on the situation, might touch everything that it could be. It's not, that's not.
When you say the question, where I left it before, doesn't have any meaning, that sounds surprising.
Well, that kind of memory is not, it isn't the sort of thing that goes into my memory bank. That trivial kind of memory. If you said to me, what'd you have for breakfast? I don't know what I had for breakfast. If it was important, it would be in my notebook.
After 10 fretful minutes of anxious searching, she finally finds what she's looking for.
My mind doesn't tend to spend much time in the past or the future. It's very immediate, which is in some ways a real luxury, whereas you may be having anxiety about the future or dwelling on the past. I'm right here.
And pass this over to Marcia and give me her cup, if you will.
Her friends and family know how much of the old Claudia is still missing, and how much of an effort it takes for her to carry on an extended conversation.
You both watched the conversation that I had with Claudia before. Can you tell me, Marcia, how much it took for Claudia to be that responsive and that energetic?
Claudia is physically exhausted by that kind of focused attention. It really exacts a price from her mentally.
But it is a price she is willing to pay to live in a world that she once mastered.
Talking to you right now, it's difficult to understand why you couldn't practice medicine.
Well, good. I like that. I think I've been quite successful of remembering to use eye contact with you the whole time we're speaking. I think I'm sitting up straight in my chair, and I can do some of that pretty automatically.
Claudia's success comes from her own powerful drive, which was ultimately undiminished by her injury, by the close support of family and friends, and access to professional therapy and care. One mark of that success is that she knows full well what can't be regained.
Go in outer drive entrance and ask somebody where we go. There were things that I could do with my mind beautifully before, and that I can't do so beautifully now. And it isn't that I don't feel very lucky and very, very appreciative that I can do so much with my life. But that does not stop me from missing the active, creative mind I had before.